Yeah, I want to open a safety box.
A safe deposit box?
Yeah.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our discussion of the Suspicious Activity Report, or what we've come to call the SAR, or SAR for short. There are a lot of different responsibilities that go along with any position in our financial institutions. To name just a few of the very important ones, we have the challenge of positively identifying individuals before we open their accounts. And we must be careful about guarding their information once it's in our care. Over the last few years, we've asked you for more and more observation, care, and service. Today, we're going to talk about protecting our financial institutions, indeed also protecting our country by being alert and aware to the fact that our bank or credit union may be the target of someone who wants to use us as a conduit for drug money or terrorist funding or other illegal or harmful activity. The most convenient and quickest way for U.S. dollars to be transmitted anywhere in the world is through our banking system. In order to do that, the dollars first have to be deposited in some way into accounts so that they can be wired or distributed to other entities. It's up to us to make sure that it isn't possible to do that with dirty dollars, that is, funds that are the proceeds of criminal activity. And if the attempt is made to do that, it's up to us to see that we have systems in place to help detect that activity and, if detected, to report it to law enforcement. When we first started to alert law enforcement about suspicious activity, it was because of blatant money laundering due to drug trafficking. If you wanted to buy drugs in another country to sell in the United States, you had to pack up a few very large suitcases with cash, get them through customs, and take them to the drug supplier in the other country. That wasn't practical, so accounts were opened to facilitate the purchases. Drug dealers, or their smurfs, or mules as their so-called employees were called, would make large cash deposits made up of small denomination currency that was collected on the street for the sale of drugs. When enough cash had been deposited into the account, a wire would be sent to another country to purchase more drugs, and the cycle would simply continue. What you might call a very successful capitalistic venture. That's when we got involved. First, the Internal Revenue Service developed a form called the Currency Transaction Report, which was filed by financial institutions when over $10,000 in cash was deposited or withdrawn in a transaction or a series of transactions in one day. Then, the Suspicious Activity Report was created. And now, the data from both the CTR and the SAR is collected through the United States Treasury Department, and that data is made available to law enforcement agencies in the U.S. This way, they can be alerted to where the cash was coming from and where it's going. Of course, the crooks caught on very quickly to the new rules and found ways around them. They opened fraudulent accounts and structured their deposits so they were under $10,000, and found even more and different ways to launder their money. Congress and Treasury then reacted by developing other record-keeping and reporting requirements and methods in order to try to keep ahead of the illegal activity. As part of these reporting requirements, every type of depository institution, we've listed them in your material, must now file a suspicious activity report with the Treasury Department on any suspicious activity relevant to a possible violation of law or regulation. There are 4 criteria that we must take into consideration in order to file a suspicious activity report. First, we must report any insider abuse, actual or attempted, in any amount. That might include embezzlement or other financial activity where the institution is a victim. Second, we must file whenever we detect suspected illegal transactions totaling $5,000 or more, and we know the name of the perpetrator. Third, we report when those suspected illegal transactions total $25,000 or more and we have no knowledge of the identity of the subject. This might occur, for example, in the case of kiting, or where you have detected identity theft and you only know the name of the victim, not the perpetrator. And lastly, we must file on transactions of $5,000 in funds or other assets if we have reason to suspect the funds came from illegal activities, or the transaction is designed to evade the Bank Secrecy Act regulations, or the transaction has no business or apparent lawful purpose. It is not the sort in which the particular customer would normally be expected to be engaged in. In other words, the depository institution knows of no reasonable explanation for the transaction after examining the available facts, including the background and possible purpose of the transaction. The regulations say we must file if the transactions exceed $5,000. They also say we may file, that is, we are permitted to file, even if the illegal activity does not meet the $5,000 requirement. Individuals, some of whom might be our good customers, can be scammed into illegal transactions thinking they are within the limits of the laws. Let me illustrate.
How's everything going, Linda?
Oh, good. Kind of been a quiet day for a change.
We could use a few more of those.
You know, I've been wanting to ask you about one of my regulars.
Really? Which one?
Old Mr. Klein. He lives around the block from where I grew up, and we always call him Old Mr. Klein. I probably shouldn't anymore, but we've never called him anything else. It seems like he's been the same age forever.
What's the problem with him?
Well, it's no problem, except he's been depositing a lot of money lately. He used to come into the branch, I don't know, once a week with a small check to cash. I think it was the only time he left his house, except maybe to go to the grocery store. I know he doesn't have a job. In fact, he hasn't worked in years. And now he's coming in 2 or more times almost every day and deposits cash. Sometimes as much as $5,000 each time. In fact, let me show you. There's a lot of money in his account. There's almost $100,000. And that's a lot of money. And today he asked me about how he goes about transferring money from his account to another account, or how to wire money to another bank. And then he wanted to know where he could purchase a small calculator. He said he had to figure out percentages, and somebody told him he could do that on one of those. I don't know, after hearing all those scams and money laundering schemes that we learned about in training class, I hope I'm not being paranoid, but this just doesn't feel right. I don't know, would you check it out for me?
We'll do more than that. Did he give you information about the account he wanted to transfer it to, or maybe the bank he wanted to send it to?
No, not exactly. You know, but I think I can find that out.
Well, we'll definitely want to know that. In the meantime, I'll get some records on the account and take a look at what's been happening.
Okay.
The next time he comes in, try to ask him some questions about where he wants to transfer the money to. And if you can, you might want to carefully ask him some questions that'll get us a little more information about where he gets his cash from.
Right.
But don't scare him off, at least not yet. You might want to say that you're doing it to maybe provide some more financial products that we have for him.
Okay, he always comes to my window. He says he doesn't like to deal with strangers, so, you know, I hope he's not in trouble.
Well, I hope not too, but it doesn't sound very good.
No, it doesn't.
Now, let me repeat. The transaction has no business or apparent lawful purpose, or is not the sort in which the particular customer would normally be expected to engage in, and the depository institution knows of no reasonable explanation for the transaction. This activity fits the description. It sounds as if old Mr. Klein has been approached by someone who convinced him he could earn some easy money by helping move illegal funds. You often find ads for these jobs in the paper advertising easy earnings. Sometimes our elderly people can get sold on the fact that they're just helping some unfortunate person by providing a banking service for which they're paid a nice fee. They don't realize that it's made them a part of the crime itself. Daily deposits of cash in Mr. Klein's account are not normal activity. Since those early days when we thought drug funds were the only illegal deposits we had to worry about, we've discovered many more ways we were being used. After 9/11, we learned that terrorist funding could be accomplished through fraudulent accounts. Identity theft was flourishing. Fraudulent investment scams were on the rise, and tax evasion was painfully simple. We also found financial institutions were not the only ones being victimized. Gold was being purchased from jewelry stores or dealers as a way to transport funds into or out of the country. Automobiles, yachts, and even real estate properties were being purchased in cash. Casinos were being used to convert illegal funds. Law enforcement is doing their best to identify any areas that are vulnerable. Many of these entities also have to file currency transaction reports and suspicious activity reports, just the same as financial institutions. Many of these businesses are also required to establish anti-money laundering programs similar to financial institutions.
How's the car business?
It's good. We did well this morning, but I don't know how you put up with those cash transaction reports.
Well, we have to stay in compliance so we can stay open and continue to loan you money.
I'll tell you what, they're a pain in the neck. I had to fill one out this morning.
Why'd you have to file one today?
I had some guy came into the shop, wanted to buy a new car, paid cash. Do you know how long it takes to count $51,000, all 20s and hundreds? So my accountant's gonna come in and make the deposit today, okay? Want to give you a heads up on that. Your teller's gonna have to verify it, and it's gonna take some time.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate the heads up.
Hey, can I help you?
Well, look at that.
What?
That's the guy that bought the car. Looks like he's making a deposit. What did he do? Win the lottery? Well, I gotta get back to work. It's already been a good morning. Hey, we still getting together for that committee meeting tomorrow about the town's annual parade?
Yeah, we sure are. I'll pick you up at 11.
All right, good. That sounds good.
Buying a car with cash? Making a deposit of cash? I think I better take a look at this guy's account, see what kind of activity's going on.
What the car dealer had to file was actually a form called a report of cash payments over $10,000 received in a trade or business, which must be filed by trades or businesses when they take in cash over $10,000. It's similar to the currency transaction report that you file. Like our CTRs, there are no restrictions on revealing the fact that it was filed. The banker, however, learned something about his depositor that has obviously made him uncomfortable. Here again is an example of no reasonable explanation for the transaction. He is well advised to investigate this account further with an eye towards filing a suspicious activity report. In the narrative portion of the SAR, he'll want to relate that the conversation with the car dealer is what aroused his suspicion. It may well be the deposit being made in that last transaction is under the $5,000 obligatory reporting limit. That is not a problem as far as filling out and filing a SAR. A suspicious transaction can be filed voluntarily below that limit. We are well protected from civil liability by the safe harbor given to financial institutions for filing suspicious activity reports, regardless of whether the report was required in a given transaction or not. We are also put on notice that we may not notify any person involved in the transaction that the transaction has been reported. SARs are strictly confidential. There certainly is nothing illegal about making cash deposits, but when we notice continuous cash deposits and we can't determine a legitimate reason for them, it may be time to ask some questions. Asking those questions may be one of the hardest things for frontline personnel to do. However, even if you don't get satisfactory answers, you still may prevent your financial institution from being used as an unwilling participant in money laundering.
You see the fellow filling out a deposit ticket over there?
The one with the pile of cash on the counter? Yeah.
He comes in here a lot, doesn't he?
Yeah. Whenever he comes to my window, he always deposits some cash, and I always have to recount it because he makes mistakes all the time. I mean, he made a deposit at my window yesterday, and he was $20 off. I had to count it twice before he believed me. Pulled a 20 out of his pocket and made it up. I wonder what he does to make all that money.
Remember what Dora Reeves said last week when we were talking about money laundering and suspicious activity reporting? Well, this guy comes in several times a week, makes cash deposits into his personal account. I mean, what kind of job could he have that he's able to come in and make cash deposits several times a week? I mean, it's always small bills, but, you know, and it's not a lot of money.
Well, whenever I wait on him, it's at least $1,000.
Oh.
How much does it have to be before we report it?
Well, for it to be suspicious, it could be any amount of money. You know, I'm trying to think how Dora Reeves put it. It's not the type of transaction you would normally expect someone like this to make. You know, it was something like that. You know, I'm gonna ask some questions. Good morning. What can I do for you today?
Just a deposit, please.
Sure, I can take care of that for you. You come in a lot and make cash deposits every week, don't you?
Well, this is where my checking account is. Where else would I go?
Well, it's just that most of our customers who come in and make frequent cash deposits are doing so on behalf of a business. And we just want to make sure you have the right account relationship with our bank. If you are running a business, maybe you want to talk to our customer service people. They could maybe help you with your business. I could introduce you.
No, that's all right.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. Yeah, I'm fine.
These alert tellers may have just stopped a problem before it started. It certainly wouldn't hurt to take a closer look at the account to see where the deposits were going, too. Cash depositing is not the only way we can be alerted to illegal activity. There are other areas where it pays to keep a sharp eye on what's happening.
Hi, may I help you?
Yeah, I want to open a safety box.
A safe deposit box?
Yeah,
Do you have an account with us?
yeah,
And do you have some ID that I could see, please?
yeah.
Okay, Mr. Phillips. What size box do you think you'll need? You'll have your choice of these different sizes.
Yeah, one of those.
The smallest one?
Yeah. Can I borrow a pen?
Sure. And will that box be in one name?
Yeah, mine.
Okay, and one more thing, Mr. Phillips. Would you like for us to charge your account the annual $35 fee for the box rental? We would automatically debit it at the same time every year.
No, I don't want no charge on the account. Here.
All right. Well, let's finish up the paperwork and I'll get you a receipt. Could you please sign here? And when I took him back to the box, he didn't even want to take it into a booth. He just threw the money into the box and told me to put it back. Said he'd be back later this week sometime to go in again. Then he turned around and made a $2,500 cash deposit. Okay, we'll flag his entry card and we'll call you when he comes back in. Oh, he didn't even want us to charge his account the annual fee. He insisted on paying in cash. Well, I got the number off of his deposit ticket. It's 2324.
No reasonable explanation. Of course, we don't normally know what's in a safe deposit box, nor do we want to know. But in this case, he shared that information with the safe deposit person with no problem at all. If the $2,500 deposits are frequent and similar, and always after a visit to the safe deposit box, it could definitely be structuring, keeping his deposits well below the $10,000 reporting requirement. It certainly is suspicious. In this case, where suspicion is aroused but not by the actual transaction, we are still permitted and encouraged to report the activity. We can report when we believe the activity is relevant to the possible violation of any law or regulation, but whose reporting is not required by the regulation. Of course, if the evidence of a whole lot of cash is plopped on your desk the way we just illustrated, your suspicions will be immediately aroused. Do you really want this fellow for a safe deposit box holder? You might want to think about whether or not you have a safe deposit box available at this time for this person to rent. In doing a risk assessment of our financial institutions, when it comes to adherence to the Bank Secrecy Act, one of the things we have to be cautious of is that our customers or members who also must file CTRs and SARs have done all the things they must do and make all the reports they're obliged to make under the requirements of the Bank Secrecy Act. Automobile dealers, casinos, and the like usually know their requirements, and we're fairly certain they are doing what they're supposed to do. However, the same doesn't hold true all the time for what we call MSBs, money service businesses. Many of them are the corner store, or what we commonly call mom and pop shops. The way the statute reads, in addition to other criteria, is one that says if they cash any check over $1,000, they are considered to be a money service business. They now must be registered with the Treasury Department's Financial Crime Enforcement Network. They must be licensed, and there may be other state requirements they have to meet. They must also have an anti-money laundering program, very similar to those at financial institutions. The vast majority of MSBs are legitimate businesses. However, it is your responsibility to determine if a customer is conducting MSB activities, such as check cashing or money transfer services, and that their financial activity is consistent with their MSB services. It's very important that you know if your customer or member is a money service business, because your financial institution will be held accountable if they have not met all the requirements. It will not be unusual to hear your new accounts person asking questions like, will you be cashing any checks? Will you be issuing traveler's checks, money orders, or stored value cards? Will you be acting as a money transmitter? What type of deposits will you usually be making? Cash, checks, electronic wire transfers? We've included business account opening forms with all these questions and more in your material. It's important to know as much about your new business customer as possible. While we're discussing business customers, I'd like to share another possible suspicious activity problem. When we talk about currency transaction reports, we're referring to cash transactions. In the case of suspicious activity, the transactions don't have to be in cash. Consider this business transaction problem.
Are you real busy? I have something I want to show you.
No problem. What do you got?
Well, this looks like a normal check deposit, but you said at that meeting we had that if anything looks suspicious to us, we should talk to you about it.
Right. And what about this transaction looks suspicious?
Well, you'll notice all these money orders and second endorsed checks are going to our Patty's Pizza Parlor and restaurant account. I mean, this deposit totals $32,000.
Right. And they're all made out to the pizza place, and they're all endorsed by Patty.
Right. Well, first of all, I went to school with the guy who made the deposit today. He dropped out of school our senior year, and I heard he was arrested a couple weeks ago for drug dealing.
Oh, that's not good.
And this is the third time this week we've had the same kind of big deposit to this account, which for that little restaurant seems like a booming business. And it also seems to me that most people don't pay for their pizzas or meals with money orders or checks payable to themselves. It just looks a little funky to me.
Well, I think you're right. Here, let me take a closer look at the account activity. Well, it looks like they might be cashing checks. That would get rid of cash, too. Well, you know what? I'd be willing to bet there are wires going out of the account. And I'll bet they're going to Latin America. You know what? Let me take a closer look at these, and I'll be back in a few minutes.
Okay, thanks. So you don't think I'm being paranoid then?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, I think you're being sharp. You probably caught a pretty significant money laundering scheme here. I'll let you know.
This goes back to that no reasonable explanation for the transaction after examining the available facts, including the background and possible purpose of the transaction. We know that most restaurants tend to deposit large amounts of cash when they make their deposits. That's to be expected because many of their customers pay for their meals in cash. You would not expect a restaurant to deposit large numbers of postal money orders or third-party checks. In the preceding scenario, it sounds like the restaurant's being used as a conduit to launder currency. In this case, your customer, Patty's Pizza Parlor and Restaurant, may have decided it was too suspicious to deposit cash directly into his account. Instead, he took cash from drug sales and went to the post office and purchased money orders. And perhaps he also got rid of some of that cash by cashing checks for people. He then deposited those cash checks and money orders into his account, thinking the bank will be suspicious about cash activity, but not about deposits made up of checks and money orders. Well, in this case, he went to the wrong bank. This is a good example of an ongoing violation. If you suspect that the source of your customer's funds is from drug sales, you should consider contacting law enforcement directly. The suspicious activity report specifically refers to this. It says, in situations involving violations requiring immediate attention, such as when a reportable violation is ongoing, the financial institution shall immediately notify by telephone appropriate law enforcement and financial institution supervisory authorities in addition to filing a timely suspicious activity report. You are to list your contact information on the SAR you file. Identity theft is one of the major problems we have to deal with on an ongoing basis. It just doesn't seem to be going away, just getting worse. Listen to Mary Lois's problem.
Please have a seat. How may I help you this morning?
I'm Mary Lois Broom, and I got this letter from you yesterday telling me that my account was overdrawn.
And what would be the problem?
I don't have an account with you. This letter was addressed to me at my home, but my account is with another bank, not with you.
Do you have some identification, Ms. Broom, that I could see?
Certainly.
And what are the last 4 digits of your Social Security number?
0023.
And this is your correct address?
Yes, it is.
Can you tell me if you've had anything stolen, any identification, personal information, anything like that?
None that I know of, but I've been getting strange phone calls recently about overdue payments on things I never bought. I'm afraid something is terribly wrong.
I think you may be right.
Unfortunately, Mary Lois Broom is a victim of identity theft. We know there are now certain obligations we have with respect to her. We have to help her in any way possible and make sure she has an opportunity to review any records in her name. But this situation also calls for a suspicious activity report. One caution when filling out the report. Mary Lois's name does not go in Part 1 under Subject Information. You are to note in that area information about the person or entity involved that caused the report to be filed, not the victim of the activity. Mary Lois's name should only be in the narrative part of the report, Part 5. Speaking of the narrative, it is one of the most important parts of the suspicious activity report. The data in Parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 will give the investigator the facts of who, where, and when the activity happened. What happened, why it happened, and how it happened are the pieces of information that should be in the narrative in Part 5. Provide a detailed description of the known or suspected criminal violation or suspicious activity. For instance, if you're suspicious because the activity is not what you would expect this person would normally do, say so. Describe concisely but fully why you consider the activity as suspicious. There are other details about filing the suspicious activity report and completing the narrative we've included in your material that compliance, security officers, and auditors should find helpful. For instance, in the case of kiting, where there is more than one financial institution involved, there may be the advantage of the institutions filing a joint suspicious activity report. The instructions on how to do that are clearly spelled out on the SAR. However, as a general rule, the information that you have filed a SAR is not information that can be shared with anyone other than by financial institutions that are doing a joint filing. We've provided some samples of situations that might take place in your financial institution that could alert you to the fact that a SAR should be filed. If you have any concerns or suspicions about any transactions or activities that take place in your office, it's important that you share them with your anti-money laundering compliance officer. We'd like to be absolutely positive that our financial institutions are not being used for illegal purposes. We'd like to be able to say that it's impossible for any terrorist financing to originate in our banks or credit unions. But we're only as good as the eyes and ears on our front lines. It really depends on you. It's your observation, your awareness, your reporting that can and will make the difference. Thank you for your attention.